who took the pictures? Did you take the pictures as well? Because the pictures of the food are beautiful and mouth-watering. It makes everything look wonderful. And I was fortunate enough to taste one of those, the pineapple upside down cake, which was delicious. But there are others. Crepes I thought looked wonderful too. Did you take the pictures too?
Yes, I did take the photos. Thank you, Grammy. That's the power of a grandmother.
I have to say, I recognize the wallpaper. Okay, the next question is Alyssa.
I was just wondering what made you interested in this topic and how you decided to research this.
I think the most important part that interested me was that, like, I love food, and I wanted to, like, understand more about, like, how my food came to be and, like, what had to happen to make that happen, as well as, like, food has such a long history, and like I have food that I grew up with that my grandma made, for instance, like, so it was like researching that as well as like why those foods were popular.
And Piero's got a couple questions for you.
Sorry, my phone wasn't cooperating. But yeah, is there a process to identifying a food for a moment opposed to a decade? Is there a food that you're identifying for this moment during quarantine and COVID-19?
Well, my mother, love her, she wanted me to do one for COVID-19 for just the snippet of the 2020s, which was going to be homemade sourdough bread. And so I did.
You should always listen to your mother.
Maybe I'll include the recipe. It was quite simple.
Okay, and a question from Brooke.
Maddie? Yeah, I have a question. I'm wondering what's the most interesting thing you learned in your research about why something was popular at a certain time, and if it was like because some ingredient was more available or because that was trendy at the time. I'm just curious what was most interesting to you that you might not have known before.
I think it was a lot about like the trade routes and like what was able to be put into mass market shelves. So going back to the pineapple upside down cake, like how pineapple was finally able to be exported out of Hawaii and be put in supermarkets all over the United States because of trade routes from World War I, and that there was process canning, and so it was able to be scaled up mass market.
Oh, interesting.
Leilani has a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was like certain decades that were like really easy to choose the food for, and then some decades that you like had a harder time like debating which food to make for it.
Oh.
We're on mute for the second part of that question.
Okay, I'll ask it. So if there were certain decades that were like, oh, I know exactly what I want to make for it, and some decades that you had more of a debate on like what you should make for it.
I think that the hardest decades were ones that I had to do more research on. So like for the 1940s, I was pretty much right off the bat knew I wanted to do meatloaf because it was something that I had heard happened in the 1940s. But for things earlier than that and during times that I hadn't really learned about in both history class and just with my family, I had to do more research for.
Okay, unless there's any more questions, that will be that.
I have one, Madeline. So first, I just have to tell you that as we were working on this, and I get little bits at a time as we kind of went forward through the project. And then when I got to 2010, I just have to tell you, I just had a big laugh. Okay, the gluten-free vanishing oatmeal cookie, I thought it was really spot on. You know, and I thought that really captured the kind of the ethos of the day, right? The zeitgeist. And my question though is, you know, we're talking about what your favorites were and one of the most interesting and so on. I want to also know, and maybe your family can answer this, like what was your least favorite or the thing that came out worse, right?
The least favorite was the poor man's meal, which includes potatoes, hot dogs, and tomato sauce. It was not a good
agreed.
Yeah.
Would not recommend.
Yeah. On the other hand, I want to know when the next tiramisu is.
Yeah, next tiramisu, next pineapple upside down cake, guacamole, you know, that kind of thing. I wouldn't be mad.
There's a rumor going around that she's going to make a pineapple upside down cake to share with the faculty here. I heard that somewhere. I don't remember where.
Maybe. When this whole entire thing is over, I'll hand deliver one myself.
Okay, well, thank you. You want to move on to the next one here, Madeline?
The next one is Leilani. Go for it.
Hey, hi, I'm Leilani from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And my project was centered around somatics, which is kind of just a fancy way to say how do we visualize sound. So I did 3 different experiments. The first one was the Chladni Plate. And and so that was just vibrating sand on top of a metal plate at certain frequencies to create certain patterns. And then my second experiment was with, I don't remember which order one. Yeah. Okay. So so this was a little bit of a contraption to make. It was just a mounted metal plate on top of 2 speakers, and then I played certain frequencies through the speakers with that setup. And the sound vibrated to create certain patterns. And then the second one was the laser experiment, which was playing certain frequencies or songs through a speaker and a tube that vibrated, that vibrated that balloon, which had a mirror on the outside, and I pointed a laser pointer at it, and it made different shapes. So that's going through the frequencies, creating different shapes. And the pictures are just right below it at certain frequencies that created more defined shapes. Yep, and those are them at the certain frequencies. And then lastly, the third one was, and those are different songs. And then lastly, the third one was a dish of chilled vodka on top of a speaker that I played certain frequencies through that vibrated the vodka in the dish to create certain still waves, they're called, so that there's certain waves in the vodka that aren't traveling in a certain direction. They're a little bit hard to capture, but hopefully you can see what's happening. Any questions?
Yeah, Anders has a question for you.
Yeah, I want to know, first of all, I want to know how you got a hold of the vodka.
Well, it was not my vodka, but I did have
you don't have to, you don't have to reveal your sources. I know, I was curious, this is interesting because, I mean, I'm sort of a math and physics. This is all like got to do with interference patterns and whatever. I'm wondering if you ever, did you try to compute ahead of time which frequencies would be interesting, or was it just purely experiment all the way up the range and all of a sudden interesting things happened?
Well, for me, it was purely experimental. I didn't do too much to see I kind of just wanted to see what would happen. And of course there are, especially for the Chladni Plate, this experiment like is out there and different metals will vibrate differently, but you have a rough idea of the, you know, the range of frequencies. But so I started in a certain range, but I really just, it was a big range. So I really just went through it to see what would happen.
Yeah, cool. That's interesting.
It's fun with your song choices too.
Yeah, they were quite different, but that was fun. That was one of the most fun parts.
Sophie has a question.
I'm just curious what made you want to learn more about this.
So I said a little bit long of a thought process, but I started just, I love science. That's what I want to do later in life. And actually I started with chemistry is really what I love, and I wanted to see what I could do with that, and somehow I ended up in physics. But really it was just looking up different fun science experiments, because I knew I kind of wanted to do more of an experiment than I guess an art, like painting or something. So so I kind of was just a deep dive through the internet, to be honest. And this looked really cool, and it started with this really cool music video of a whole bunch of different types of somatic machines in a music video, and that kind of launched this.
Madeline has a question.
I just wanted to know which one was your favorite method.
I don't know. I don't think I've thought about it. The laser playing the different songs was probably the most fun. But then building it was not the most fun. So parts of things, and then the Chladni Plate was a process definitely to build. But I liked the results altogether of that. It was really cool to see. And the Vodka Dish was probably the easiest, like the most straightforward one. So I would say that one was pleasant in that way. So different parts for the different ones, but.
Okay, Reese has a question.
So I've got two quick questions. First, why vodka? And second, you said you attached a mirror to a balloon. Is that the way, and then I think that was on a speaker, is that right?
Yeah, around a tube with a speaker in the
Right, so around the tube, yeah. And is that the way light shows are typically done? You know, is that the way, was that the origin of how that was originally constructed as an idea? Do you know?
Well, that's not how I came upon it. I don't know. Actually, good question.
Well, yeah, so maybe that's the question. How did you come across
Yeah, well, that one particularly, I stumbled upon somatics as a field first, or as a subject. So I looked up a lot of experiments with somatics and looked up what can I actually accomplish at home. And that was one of the projects. It started out a little bit different with a tube. That what I had was a container, and the balloon was where the lid was supposed to be, right? So it was closed. But where I first saw it was an experiment where it was a tube with one open end and one end with the balloon covering it, so that you could speak through the open end and it would show your vocal vibrations. But the tube I had was too big, so I ended up using a container, and then I put a speaker in that to kind of fix that problem. But it started out with just another like somatics, I guess, sort of project that I found, and I sort of adapted it to work. And then the first question was,
why vodka?
Why vodka? So it's actually chilled vodka. And just doing research on this type of stuff, they just found that it was a good viscosity or thickness for the product to show it. You can use water, you can use other liquids, but that thickness works well with vibrations to show the waves.
And we have a question from Mo.
Leilani, when we were, when I'm looking at your project and looking through your website and so on, I'm thinking to myself, right, like, how is this an art project? So maybe you can tell me a little bit about the relationship between science and art, kind of as you have maybe been playing with that kind of boundary right there.
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to kind of play with, I guess, how can science be used to make art? Because again, I am very scientific type of person, and I like to stay in that part. But but I guess it was more like the patterns created and the images and the videos I was able to get from it. So it was more like creating something through a scientific process that could then create art itself, if that makes sense. So I think all the patterns and all the video of the laser dancing around on the wall and stuff like that was where I saw the art from it, was I guess what I built creating art. So yeah.
So my follow-up question is then, at what moment did the art take place, right? Do you feel like the art was taking place when you were building all your components? Do you feel like the art was taking place when the laser was finally shooting and you recorded it? Do you feel like at what point do you feel like the most beauty came out for you?
Well, for me personally, it'd be at the end of it. I was in the process, so the building process might have been a little more frustrating than beautiful to me. But I think that if you look at it as an experiment, I think experimentation can be art. And if you look at it through that lens, then yeah, all the experimentation, what wires do I need? Where do I plug it into? How do I make it work? All the failed attempts, all the different problem solving, all of that I think falls under art. You know, being creative to try to figure out how to make this thing. I think that is art, and I think I separated it a little bit differently into experimentation and then the project or the result being art. But I think there's different ways to look at it, and I definitely can see the experimentation also being looked at as an art process. I don't know. I think I'd still look at it separately as being one art process and then a result being another art piece. But yeah, I think the process could also be looked at. It's still experimentation.
Are there any more questions? Thank you, Leilani.
All right, thank you. So next up will be Mia.
Hi, my name is Mia Heilsberg. I'm from Seattle, and I researched memory and forgetting and why we forget. And specifically, I talked about Alzheimer's disease and what it feels like to be forgotten. And I tried to show like forgetting and being forgotten in these paintings. So yeah, if you have any questions.
I have a question. Can you talk about the process you use to make these? The patterning that happens on the surface is really interesting.
Yeah, so I just painted them with acrylic paint on a canvas, and then once they dried, I use frosted glass spray that Chris recommended for me, and I did like a thin coat, and it was kind of worrisome at the start because it wasn't really like working for a little bit, and then I just kind of like layered it on as much as I could, and then it made this cool like effect where it's almost like they're disappearing. But it was kind of unpredictable, which is a little scary.
Madeline has a question.
I was wondering who your subject matter is, because they are all different ages and yeah.
Yeah, so these are both two of my siblings, and they were just here, so I decided to paint my siblings, and I wanted it to be more personal and be like them related to me, because I obviously wouldn't want my own siblings to forget me or for me to forget my own siblings. Yeah.
Reese has a question.
So both of your paintings here show faces. What was behind that choice? And have you considered other ways to represent maybe other kinds of things that might be lost through Alzheimer's?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely not just you forget how a person looks. It's sort of you forget like who they are and stuff. And I think for me the best way was just to show that with faces, because I was trying to have like a specific characteristic of each person be like the most clear. Like in the top one, I feel like you can mostly see her eyes, and in the bottom one, it's also his eyes. So like just what people are remembered for, I think. And obviously I thought of other ideas, like not just their faces, like there's parts of people that are forgotten, but I just thought this was the best way to show that.
Mia, I just really love your texture, the texture on this.
Thank you.
It's a great effect.
Anders has a question.
Yeah, I just, you know, well, Mia and I talked about her work also, but one thing I found interesting in reading your paper was when I started reading, I thought it was about you forgetting someone. And then, of course, it became clear that it was about someone forgetting you. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that contrast. It's really, there's sort of, forgetting can mean vastly different things, really, you know, and with depending on which side of it you're coming from.
Yeah, I think, I mean, definitely at the start, I was sort of going to be doing it as me forgetting a person or a person forgetting me. Like I was going to distinct those two, but then like as I was writing, I realized they're kind of almost intertwined. Like as a person forgets you, you also lose pieces of them and you're not remembering them for how they were. So I feel like they're almost one and the same, if that makes sense.
Cindy has a question.
Hi, I really love the portraiture. The art's really great, and I think that the message is really well captured. How was it for you researching something so personal and then trying to come up with an art piece that would be meaningful and personal at the same time?
I think it was definitely kind of difficult for me to be doing research and narrative at the same time because I was writing about a person, but then I was also researching another idea, and like combining those together was really difficult for me to like figure out how to do. But I think in the end, it almost made like the research and the art more personal because like there's a story behind it all, but it was also hard for me to get every aspect of the story, which I think was why it was helpful to have the paper alongside with it, because from the art, you can't exactly tell everything that I was trying to say. So, yeah.
Are there any other questions? It's not Mia.
I didn't type my name in, but I'm her mom, so I should know this, but I actually don't even. I actually would love to hear about how you came up with the concept, because I've never asked you that.
Yeah, I honestly don't really, I guess like I wanted to do something about like the brain and how it works, and memory is just such a weird concept to me because you can't like, it's like you see them in your head, but you can't really see them in real life. Like you have a brain, I know they go in there, but like where do they go, if that makes sense? And originally that's what I wanted to research, but then I just thought about like what memory means to me personally, and then I came up with the idea of my grandma and how she had Alzheimer's and how that, like the idea of forgetting and where do they go. Yeah, so that just kind of tied it in for me.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mia.
The next artist is Sophie.
Hi, I'm Sophie Edwards. I live in Corrales, New Mexico. And for my project, I studied the psychological bond between a horse and a rider. So yeah, my little sister Anna was kind of my inspiration for this because her bond with horses is even stronger than mine. And yeah, that's Anna and her horse Max. Any questions?
Oh, can we see some of the artwork?
Oh, yes. Okay. So there's pictures. You're going to have to scroll down. For my artwork, I did a series of charcoal drawings. So I drew the 4 different gaits of horses' movement. So walk, trot, canter, and gallop. And then I also drew a series of different pieces of tack that have helped me become a better rider just in my life because I've been riding for like 10 years. So yeah, I did a combination of a paper and my pictures in there.
As someone who knows nothing about horses, are there specific breeds of horses that you're referring to, or is it generic?
Just in general, the horse that I normally ride, like in general, I ride a pony most of the time, but my sister loves quarter horses. So yeah.
What's the difference?
Quarter horses are like big, stocky horses. They're meant to carry heavy weight, and they're better suited to be ridden Western, but you can ride anything really on any type of horse. And ponies are small.
Okay, Leilani has a question.
Yeah, I was wondering about, like, I think you talked about it a little bit, but the use of charcoal and then like the style that you drew them in. I don't know if that's just like how you wanted to draw it, but like, yeah.
So I had some difficulty with charcoal. One, because my charcoal got there kind of late, so I didn't have as much time. And I think if I had more time, I would have gone into my paint drawings with more detail, but I didn't have as much time. But I just kind of wanted to do like more sketchy looking drawings. And yeah.
Okay, Madeline has a question.
I was wondering what your favorite thing you learned was about the bond.
Probably the fact that horses can sense pretty much everything. So if you show up to the barn really pissed off and you get on the horse, the minute you put your feet in the stirrups, your horse is going to be pissed off. And I thought that was really interesting. So.
It's sort of psychic.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy has a question.
Hi. So I work with there are a lot of evaluating a lot of therapy type groups. Have you heard of equine therapy, and did you look it up for any of this? Because you could really see the benefit that people have with working with horses.
Yeah, so I actually used to volunteer at a place that did equine therapy, and just like my personal experience seeing people on horses with PTSD or other things, it really is fascinating, and it definitely helps people. I can agree with that.
And Anders has a question.
Oh, I was just curious about, like who forms the bond with horses? I mean, do you see it? Is it boys, girls? Is it a certain age group? Or does it go all the way up? And what are the reasons that you see it more in certain places than others? Or is that something you looked at? Or?
So anyone really can form a bond. The main thing that it takes is trust, and there has to be like mutual trust. But typically young girls are mostly drawn to horses, just because it kind of almost provides like a sense of safety and adventure at the same time. And that's kind of why I started riding, just out of curiosity. So yeah.
Reese has a question.
So, Sophie, do you think the relationship between people and horses is unique, or is there something that's maybe more that transcends animals, that where people want to have relationships with various animals? And if so, what is that relationship? What's that about?
So I think it is definitely unique because it's kind of almost like an unspoken language. Like, the most common type of riding that expresses this would be dressage, because the whole point of dressage is to ride and do all sorts of different tests without the judges knowing that you are cueing each other. And so it's almost like you have to read each other's minds. And I think that mutual understanding between horse and rider, like the unspoken language is very unique.
Mia has a question for you.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering if you had any like takeaways from this that you applied to like your relationship with a horse. Like, did you find anything to better your relationship with an animal?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, like horses can sense everything. And I know like a few years ago, I used to show up to the barn really stressed, really angry. And the minute I get on my horse, he would act out. And I would always wonder like, why? Like, why is he acting out? And then it kind of hit me like, he's upset because I'm upset. And so that has definitely helped me realize that I need to be calm when I am around a horse. So, yeah.
So I have a question. What is dressage?
Dressage is a type of riding that basically you want to show the judges and the audience that you are doing sorts of like tricks. It's like walking, trotting, cantering, but all the basic groundwork, but you want to do it without cueing each other and signaling each other. So it's almost like the horse and rider need to read each other's mind. And it's a very, very hard type of riding. I can attest to that. I would say it's one of the hardest just because even though you're doing really basic groundwork, you have to practically read each other's minds.
So does that involve the jumps and jumping over water and all that kind of stuff? What's that?
That's hunter jumper, and that is what I do sometimes. And that is a lot harder to be reading each other's minds because you have to make sudden movements and stuff, and horses tend to want to run away from the jumps. So that's definitely a harder type to keep them in control.
Mo has a question.
All right, so pardon the backstory here, but my daughter, one of my daughters, Layla, and really both of them, they just have an uncanny ability to attract and build relationships with animals, okay? I mean, all of the neighborhood cats are in my front yard right now. Some of the neighbors' cats are in my front yard right now. And they have relationships and they know the cats and the cats, okay? And so I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about the horses. And then when I think about my personal relationship with a lot of animals and horses in this case, it's both one that's very liberating to ride a horse. It's really exciting and so on, but it's also really terrifying for me. Sometimes just being around a horse, I get nervous. And so is there anything maybe that I can do to attract some of the animals to me rather than my children? And maybe I can build a, how do you deal with being so scared around such big animals?
So every time I go into a horse's stall or whatever, I just stand there for about a minute or so, and I don't touch the horse, I don't do anything, and I just let them come to me, and that kind of builds this mutual trust, and I don't make sudden movements or anything, because sometimes people just open the gate, go in, put the halter on, and walk them right out, and that's when the horses can get a little bit anxious because they don't know what's going on. So I know for me, like just standing there for a minute and letting them come up to me always helps me. So yeah.
And then kind of as a follow-up question, I'm always curious as to how this might inform your relationships with other people. And maybe what can we learn from engaging with animals that might allow us to, more effectively or more kindly or whatever, deal with other people?
So in my research, I came across a study about German female riders, and about half of them were in romantic relationships and the other half weren't, and all of them rode horses. And the ones that were not in romantic relationships had much more self-confidence and were a lot more comfortable with themselves, and they also had stronger bonds with the horses. So I know for me personally, I moved around a lot when I was younger, and I kind of struggled with making friends, but like being around horses was always not so hard for me. And I think it kind of helped me become more social and be better at talking to people. So I think it definitely can help.
You're muted, Mo.
Oh, I didn't have anything to say. I was nodding. Thank you, Sophie.
I don't see any more questions. If you have any questions, step right up. Okay, well, thank you, Sophie.
Thank you.
Back to Mo.
All right, so thank you all so much. You know, some of you may have been in the earlier presentations, and I hope that you were, because I have certainly just been extremely impressed with the students' abilities to maintain kind of a high degree of integrity with the work that they were doing, and really show a lot of resilience and creativity in their ability, like I said earlier, to deal with a really, really difficult situation. So I just want to thank them for sticking through it to the end, because I don't think that it was easy. In fact, I think it was very, very difficult to do what you've done. And I remember being a teenager and knowing that the stuff that's like right in front of me is like the most important thing, in my friends, and this is where I'm at right now. And to have all of that kind of taken away when you were just in the middle of this big adventure. I know that some of you really struggled with just trying to be here and land here and make friends and kind of come out a little bit of your shells and so on. And just at the moment when you were ready to commit, when you were there, you know, it seems like it was all taken away. And I think that that is extremely, extremely difficult, but you all handled it with such poise and such grace and really such elegance. And then to see what you've produced today, you know, and I know that some of you might be thinking like, you know, Mo, this isn't even my best work. And if I had the studio, and if I had this, and if I had that, then it could have been this, and it could have been that, and would have been amazing. And there would have been strobe lights and techno music playing and all that. But the reality is that what you produced today, before today, over the course of the last few weeks, I claim is actually probably better than what you would have created here at the studios, because of the different factors that were involved, because of you had to overcome a lot of personal challenges in order to produce what you've produced. Okay, and I salute you and I thank you for that. I also want to thank the parents, because you all helped tremendously with, I know, going to the grocery store to get, you know, supplies during COVID is not an easy thing to do, but yet Madeline had these amazing dishes, you know. I know that, you know, getting stuff sent to you and stressing about that and being anxious and, you know, trying to calm the kids down and take them to the Home Depot or, you know, Blick or wherever it may have been, also really, really challenging. And you kept them on task. You know, thank you for all of you who are like, did you check in with your teacher today? Okay. I do appreciate it, because it made our jobs easier for sure on this end, because like I said at the beginning, we were learning how to do this along with you. And for me, it's really inspiring when I know that I'm not the only person who doesn't have it all figured out. And I know that the students are looking for somebody else to have it figured out for them, but you all really are the ones who built the plane. You're the ones who are really flying it. And I'm glad that we're here today. I'm glad that you stuck through it to the end. So really a debt of gratitude is owed to you. And thank you for sharing and being generous with your spirit. So if you all have any other questions or anything to share, now's a good time. Otherwise, I think that we all owe them a huge round of applause. So.
Great work, everybody. Thank you all so much. Especially those parents who are the surrogate teachers.
Well, thank you to the teachers, of course.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Mo and Patrick.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, you all. Have a great evening, and you will hear from us again in the next couple of days. But I think that you should sleep in tomorrow. Okay. What did Mo tell you to do? He told you to sleep in. So sleep in. I'm gonna try and sleep in too. Okay.
Yeah, and one more thank you to you guys. Thank you so much for all your guys' support and especially Mo helped me a lot, but I know all of the teachers were just so supportive through this whole thing, and just thank you so much.
I second that.
enjoy the rest of your evenings, you all. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you in Hawaii. Those are early. That's early getting up in the morning, So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It has been a special challenge for you guys.
Oh, well, but we're not going to complain.
It's
no right to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really proud of Mia. I think that she did great work. And again, she had it hard at the beginning.
So hard, yeah.
It was
and
hard.
then it clicked, and then boom. So.
Boom.
Yeah, no, and thank you guys for sticking with her.
It makes me emotional.
Yeah. And I'm so bummed that we didn't get to do the whole thing in person and for real. But you know what, you guys stuck with it, and I'm gonna miss hearing your voice, Mo, in the background when she's doing online school.
Oh, yes, she is.
Well, you can call me anytime, okay?
Yeah.
Well, good night, you all. Have a great
rest
of your evening, okay?
All right, take care. Bye-bye.